Good evening to all my Rover subscribers and all the Rover lovers that watch my videos. I thought I would take a sidestep from the How Many Left Rover 45 episodes that I've done, specifically the last one concentrating on Mark II numbers, since that I own a Mark II and there is not enough things that are actually known about them cars and are sort of wide in the public forum. The other curiosity is the gearbox in my Rover 45, which is the step speed CVT automatic transmission. Now, that gearbox is somewhat, let's just say, it's distastefully seen by a lot of the Rover community. A lot of people don't like them for various reasons. Failure, mainly, the way they drive, the fact that people just weren't used to them back in the day. And CVTs now, and I shall cover this in a very, very good episode in a few months' time, hopefully. CVTs are becoming more and more popular and are specifically and more or less geared towards electric cars than any other gearbox. Obviously, the end of manual gearboxes is coming, apart from custom-built manual gearboxes for electrified classic cars. Automatic transmissions with torque converters will go the way of the wind. And especially is the fact that automatics, they're becoming more and more sophisticated in terms of the number of gears. You know, we had the first automatic gearboxes were 2 speeds, then 3 speeds, then 4 speeds. That's like in my Focus. 5 speeds, 6 speeds, 8 speeds, 9 speeds, and 10 speeds now. There is a manufacturer that's making 10 speeds. I think Jaguar and Land Rover are doing it. There's 1 or 2 that are doing that. And the idea is that you're stacking so many ratios together that the gear changes are virtually seamless, that you can't feel them and know exactly what gear you're in. So my argument is CVTs, they're going to catch on quite a lot in the future, because I suspect people are now more ready for them than what they used to be. But when the VT1, ZF VT1 gearbox was launched around 1992, which is a slap bang copy of the same gearbox that went into the Ford Fiesta 1.1 CVT, the Ford CTX as it was called. And then you had exactly the same gearbox go in the Fiat Uno, which I think it was called a Selector model. If you don't know what that is, go to Matt Fewest Driving's channel, Matt Richardson, and he has actually done a review on one of those particular cars, which is quite rare. They weren't very well thought about, but ZF copied them with the steel push belt design for front wheel drive applications, using the Van Dorn principles of CVT transmissions, and it worked quite nicely. But unfortunately, there wasn't really much of a buyer's market there. The buyer's market, when it came to automatics, were used to 3 or 4 automatic gears, mainly 3 automatic gears at this stage, and were very comfortable with their slippy slushmatics, rather than something that just seamlessly goes through one continuously changing ratio. And you get the droning sounds with that, depending on how refined the engine is. But with the K series, I would argue it's a very refined gearbox, because the K series is a refined engine and the gearbox is less drony and boomy. I would definitely say so in many respects. But it was fitted to a number of MG Rover cars from around 1992, when it was launched first in the Rover Metro. I am going to actually give you the numbers of how many MG Rover cars altogether have got this gearbox still fitted. And this gearbox was fitted all the way to the end when MG Rover went into administration. And it was fitted on pretty much all their models. There was only a couple of exceptions where they didn't quite fit it, or it was in the early stages of them using the gearbox. Now, for data reasons, it's difficult for me to tell you, particularly with the pre-Rover 2545 cars, how many of these cars were actually fitted with these CVTs first registered in the UK. I can't really give that information, because some of the information is mixed between R8s, HHRs, and the later cars, the R3s. A lot of the trim levels, actually, the trim specs like the SIs, SOIs, they got mixed up. and it's a very difficult exercise to actually break the numbers down from what I understand and what cars had these gearboxes fitted. So I'm going to make it as clear as possible in this little video. I say little video, it might drag on a bit, so just get a cup of tea and just have a listen. It might be interesting if you certainly have one with this particular gearbox. So I'm going to tell you exactly how many of this gearbox are left for each model. Now, some of these models, and I will say specifically, some of them are guesstimates, but very close guesstimates. They are based on algorithms that I've used for the Focus Mark 1 spreadsheet, which some of you may be aware of, and that has narrowed things down a lot. So we start off with the Rover Metro, where the VT1 32A that it was called, because I think there was a 27A which was fitted to the later BMW R50 Minis. I say BMW, it was a Rover product, but still. But the Rover Metro, overall, 12. There are 12 CVT transmission Rover Metros 1.4s. It was only fitted to the 1.4 on the road. 12. That's it today. As I say, I'm not going to give those totally registered because I can't accurately do that at this moment in time. Some I can, some I can't. Maybe I'll go down that road later on. And in terms of the Rover 100 that it became into, there are 36 of them on the roads. 36, a higher number. So overall, Rover Metro 100, there are 48 with the CVT transmission. It was only known as the CVT at that stage, or it was registered as an automatic on the V5. It wasn't branded as anything else. The Rover R8. Now, up to that stage, the Rover R8, if you wanted an automatic, you had to have a 216. You have to have a 216 or the 416 with the Honda D series engine and the Honda-matic 4-speed gearbox, the Slushmatic. Really good gearboxes, decent engines, bit thirsty, but you couldn't have at that stage a K series with an automatic gearbox. Rover did not have their own automatic gearbox. They started testing it in the Rover Metro in '92, and it was very low volume. Not many people bought them, but it was like a test bed to see if the 1.1K, the 1.4K series could deal with the CVT nicely and how it drove. They were quite impressed, and they wanted to roll it out further down the line and move away from the reliance on the Honda units, engines and gearboxes, especially as I suspect that the amount of engineering required, because the Honda engines were back to front, they spun the other way, was ridiculous, just for the sake of an automatic gearbox. So they knew that they had to do this. So in 1995, 1996, there was a facelift of the old R8. Now, most of the R8s went the way of the wind because the R3 and the HHR were pretty much raring to go. But they kept the Cabriolet, the Coupe and the Tomcat. Now, you could get a Rover R8 with a CVT transmission if it was a very late Coupe and Cabriolet. And they are as rare as hen's teeth now, because I've worked out that on an algorithm, there are only 10 Rover 200 R8 Cabriolets 216. It was fitted to the 1.6K series at the end. So you've got a Rover R8 216 Cabriolet. There are 10 of them left. There are approximately 10. Strange enough, I actually bumped into a fella at the Pride of Longbridge who actually had a Cabriolet, and he said he'd had the belt changed on his gearbox. And I was thinking back very recently, thinking, he can't have been right about that. Surely that'd have had the Honda-matic. His car was a very late one to have had it fitted. I think they only fitted the CVTs from 97, 98, 99 maybe. Coupe, the Rover 216 Coupe CVT. I think there's only about 5, because there's only 22 of them that are registered as Coupe 216 automatics. Most of them are the pre-1997-96 Honda-matics with the Honda D series, but I'd say about 5 of them were basically K series engines with the CVT. Very, very interesting. Again, very rare. And there was another rarity when it came to the Rover R8 400, the 416 Tourer. You could get a 416 Tourer CVT, but there aren't many of them left either. In fact, if I remember rightly, there's only about 11. Only about 11 of them. And then you had the replacement Rover R3 200. You had the 216, which was fitted with the CVT transmission, I believe, from very early on in 1996, because that's where the direction Rover were going with ZF. They wanted them to start making more units and kicking out Honda as such, because Honda and Rover were two different companies. Obviously, BMW bought them in 94, so Honda's relationship with Rover was completely defunct, really, apart from parts and sharing a few bits and pieces. There are 58 216 CVTs, Rover R8 216 CVTs left on the road today. That is pretty rare, and it is on an algorithm, but it's pretty close, give or take 5. So it could be anything from 55 to 65, but I've put it slap bang in the middle at 58 because that's what it feels right to me looking at the figures. And then this is where the transmission kind of changed. Now, we did have the MGF, which used the CVT from early on, right from the start of production. It was only ever known as the CVT, and that added on to numbers later on. But basically, around the time of the Rover 25 and 45 facelift, the gearbox got a facelift as well, or say a software update. Basically, up to that point, the gearbox was completely mechanical. And obviously, with the aid of BMW, possibly liaising with ZF, they created a system where this was happening to quite a few other manufacturers. Bosch, I believe, that owned the original Van Dorn transmissions factory where the CVT was basically born in some respects. They developed the Audi Multitronic CVT gearbox in 1999, completely computerized, very reliable, uses a lot of sensors, but it uses a chain drive instead of a steel push belt. But essentially that was to cope with 300, 400 newton meters of torque, something stupid like that in some of their cars, probably 300, because that was fitted to all the Audi A4, 5 and 6s and the diesels until 2014. So it must have been a good gearbox. So while they were doing that, BMW were thinking exactly the same thing, and they got Rover collaborating with ZF to create software to allow that gearbox to, one, do away with the kickdown cable and have a completely computer-controlled stepper motor controlling the pressures going to the clutches, or I should say the drums as such, the pulley drums. And that way you can get better fuel economy, better power, better reliability as well. There was a lot more software that went into these cars to make them even better than possibly the early ones weren't great. They were okay, but they needed improving. And computer technology and softwares were going to make a lot of gearboxes, and had up to that point made a lot of automatic gearboxes very, very reliable. And they turned it into what they call the Steptronic, which is a BMW name. So they basically put a new stepper motor on. It had its own, well, it's not an ECU, it's a gearbox interface unit. It's a small computer on the bulkhead. If it's a 45, it's in the corner by the pedals. If it's a 25, it's somewhere else, maybe behind the glove box. It's not an ECU, it's an interface unit. It tells the MEMS 3 what to do. They obviously, Rover had to upgrade from the MEMS 2 to the MEMS 3. The MEMS 3 having full compatibility to control that gearbox, but it needs GRU to actually operate a few things as well. But the GRU basically had no permissions to do anything. It was just a messenger, basically. That's kind of how I've understood it. And then you had a few wacky little things added on, but essentially it's still the same sort of gearbox. And this allowed the gearbox to have a sport mode and to have 6 fixed ratios, which is very clever for CVT, because the whole purpose of a CVT is not to have ratios. It's supposed to be seamless, but essentially you can operate it like a semi-automatic. Tiptronic is sometimes the word that's used, and quite a few Porsche cars have got that system. This is a CVT. It's a very different but similar system. and it worked a real treat. And they put it on every single one of their cars. So the first one, the Rover 25, now that was offered with the CVT on the 1.8 early on. You could get a Rover 25 CVT with the 1.8K series from the start. 2000, and I think 2001 is where they stopped it, and they basically changed it to the 1.6. Why they did that, I don't know. Maybe they were concerned about fuel economy. Now, I haven't got specific details about how many have been made for each engine, but for Rover 25 CVTs, there are 202 on the road today. Mark 1s and Mark 2s. If you want to break down, Mark 1s, 141. Mark 2s make up the rest, 61. So if you want a late Rover 25 CVT, 61. You've got to be very lucky to get one. Rover 45 CVTs. Now, this is the most popular model for CVTs, just about anyway. Overall, 265 are still on the roads, including mine now. Well, I think mine will be added to the list because this is going by 6 months ago. Mark 1s, 175 are left. Mark 2s, 90. So big difference there, 265 altogether. Bit more popular, but a bit more around than the 25 CVTs, and the most popular so far. And then you have the MG ZR CVT. So the MG ZR, the basically the MG version of the Rover 25. You could get this car with a step speed gearbox. After BMW actually left Rover and obviously chucked it in the bin basically and sold it to the Phoenix. Ooh, I could come with some nasty words there, but we won't go into that. They changed the name to Step Speed because the Steptronic name was a BMW name. They couldn't use that anymore, so they called it Step Speed. Same gearbox, there's no difference. It's all electronic. But they did offer it on this MG ZR as well and the MG ZS, which is incredible for an actual sports saloon to be fitted with an automatic gearbox. But if you understand the theory of CVT, in fact, that's a really good thing because CVTs keep the engine at peak performance all the time. It's never in the wrong ratio. So on this sort of a car, ideal. But these gearboxes have been known to not be exactly the most frugal, and they can be fragile. So not ideal. Not many of them have survived. There are only 47 ZR CVTs on the roads. That's it. 38 of them are Mark 1s, and there are 9 Mark 2 ZR CVTs. Just 9. MGZS CVT, even less. There was 24 of them overall. 14 of them are Mark 1s, 10 of them are Mark 2s. They are very rare. I actually know someone in a group who's got one, and that's in a bit of a sorry state. It's in like a can't remember the colour now. It's a bluey colour. Really nice. The most common, probably MG colour, the lot for the ZR and ZS blue. Then you have the MGF CVT. The MGF was probably one of the first ones to have it really mass produced for the car, really in higher numbers. The Rover R8 was just a bit of a run out model, is to try and see if it was a good gearbox with a bigger engine, and they put it in the MGF at the back in that mid-engine configuration. And overall, 263 of them are on the roads today. 263 steppies, as the MGFTF clubs usually say, steppies, because on the MGFs you have panels, that you actually have paddles on the steering wheel, so that it becomes even more involved to change between those 6 individual gear ratios in manual mode, which is fantastic. It's absolutely really good idea. I wish they'd have done that on the 45 CVT. The MG TF CVT, very similar numbers, 270. So we are talking about the biggest portion of CVTs are in the back of MGF TFs. which would be about just over 530 basically are left with us. So it's quite a big number, and I can understand why there's quite a few groups. And that's where I've got most of my knowledge on this particular gearbox, because you can understand that that's where the survival is. So in total, there are just under 1,200 examples, MG Rover examples with this CVT ZF VT1 gearbox. That's really low. That's really low. And I suspect numbers are just going to keep going down because parts availability is a problem for these gearboxes. I don't know why that is. Possibly due to the fact that ZR is not actually a company within its own right now. It's owned by somebody else, and they stopped making the parts a long time ago, even though a lot of the parts are applicable for the gearboxes that would go in the mini R50s, R53s. They kept producing them to 2006, and a lot of the parts are actually applicable. However, some parts are not applicable, but that's a story for another video. Anyway, I thought that this would be an interesting little bit of information for the people who are actually interested in the CVT transmission. There is not a lot known about these gearboxes, and it took a bit of research for me to actually plough through and find out which ones had this gearbox. But I do think, particularly with the R8s, there was a transition between the Honda-matics and then the CVT started taking over. Once Rover had established that the CVT works absolutely fine with the K series, particularly in the Metro, they started rolling it out with the 1.6 R3 and the R8 416 Tourer and the Cabriolet and the Coupe. So yeah, if you have a Rover R8 Coupe with a 1.6 CVT, blimey heck, that is one heck of a rare car. That's the rarest. And if you have an MG ZR step speed, as it would have been known, Mark II, 9. Wow. So anyway, you take care, guys. See you very soon in another Tinkering with Beatrix video. Things are pressing on very nicely indeed. Take care.